So early retirement, can you do it and how can you do it? In this video, we'll explore an interesting case study of someone who managed to have early retirement. They retired early, they still work, but they work in a minimalist way. And effectively, we're going to explore the secrets of early retirement here. In this example, we'll consider a woman who worked as a lawyer. And interestingly enough, she didn't save a lot of money that she earned as a lawyer, as a high-paying lawyer. But she saved some of it and then she leveraged that to work several lower paying jobs before reaching financial freedom in living in Southeast Asia effectively, right? So this is really something as a life lesson that we can learn for all of us. And there's many little hints that she drops throughout this that I think we can all learn from when it comes to pursuing early retirement.
In my case, we didn't actually make big money, but because our retirement target income goal was so modest, with planning and discipline, we still managed to make it happen within a matter of about 4 years. So, how did I make money? Well, after I quit, I didn't have significant savings and I needed to replace my lost income. My dream was to live on a beach somewhere surfing, so I quit my big law job. But all my official livelihood skills, law, compliance, blah, has zero relevance to my new direction.
So before we move on, what's interesting here is about setting the bar low. And I know that sounds a bit funny, but if you want to live abroad, you can live a good quality of life for much lower cost, right? In the West, we know how expensive it is even to get basic healthy food. Organic food costs double the price of, the normal food. But in a developing country, you're going to get food which is less processed, less chemicals for like the normal price or below the average price you'd pay in the West. Also, if you're living in a low cost of living location, we'll go through some of the details of how much it costs for her to live. But she's living in Bali and other parts of Southeast Asia, and she's doing a key important thing that we're going to go through some of the numbers coming up soon. But the key thing is, if you're going to live abroad, you're going to save a ton of money if it's outside the West, but you also should think about not living in the major cities. So don't live in, for example, Bangkok, Thailand. You might want to live in Chiang Mai, which is a digital nomad hub. It's lower cost. There's lots of different locations. If you're going to move to a third world country, if we want to call it that, not only you're going to save money that way, but if you pick a smaller city in a third world country that's still developed, still has the facilities you want, maybe healthy food, access to a gym, space in terms of nature and mountains or a beach, you can still do that by not picking the tourist or typical expat jurisdictions, maybe somewhere slightly outside of that expat zone where you can save a ton more money and live a good quality of life. So the point number one there is kind of setting the bar low, because that's quicker to hit your financial target, your financial freedom number through savings and investments. And the other thing is, like I say, when she quit her law job, she didn't save a lot of money. She actually had to develop a bunch of new skills. And that's important for you to consider, right? If you quit some of these high paying corporate jobs, many people, because the living costs are high to be in a major city in the West, London, New York, places like that, Silicon Valley, you might not save as much as you think you would. So think about reskilling, right? That's kind of important, right? And we're going to go through some of the interesting skills she did develop. And that's very important to just be ready to detach and think maybe you invested a ton of money in student loans to get that accounting degree or that finance degree or that law degree. You might have to completely pivot in a way that might seem like that was a complete waste. But if you want your financial freedom and your time freedom, just be open-minded to that. So let's learn more about her living costs here.
So to get to my dream life, I moved somewhere cheap to live, Vietnam. And I started reskilling myself. I spent a couple of months training, took exams, and got certified as a surf instructor. The day after I got my cert, I walked down the beach where all the surf schools were, and I remember this so clearly. 26 rejections later, I got my first job as an in-house surf instructor at a nice resort. Yay! My first new income stream of my new life. So of course, the pay is peanuts compared to my lawyer's salary, but fortunately the living costs in Vietnam was so affordable that it was still easy to live comfortably. I spent the next 5 years traveling Asia, surfing, teaching, picking up more skills and certs, yoga, Zumba, personal training. I taught language classes. I did freelance remote legal and compliance work assignments. I worked part-time as a guest relations manager at a high-end resort. Along the way, I started 4 businesses. I sold beanbags, I sold luxury Brazilian swimwear, I started a yoga studio. Heck, in between when I had to return to Singapore for personal reasons for some time, I even went back to a corporate stint for a while. Finally, after I met and married Vitaly.
So we'll go through the next stage in her life in a moment, but there's so many important lessons here, right? Firstly, when she quit her law job, she learned how to become a surf instructor, and she dealt with 26 rejections. And that's why it's important, if you are quitting your corporate job or you're looking for early retirement, really put your ego to one side, because many people coming from a major corporation, a major law firm, maybe in a higher salary, they would think, oh, well, I can go to a small no-name beach in Bali, become a surf instructor, and they should immediately offer me a job. I'm a Westerner. I come from a high status position. But no, she willing to go through 26 job rejections, even in a small like beach surf town, before she got her job as a surf instructor. So just really bear that in mind, right? If you really want to pursue early retirement, there's going to be a bunch of kind of tough life lessons that might hit you. It's not going to be like, oh, you're going to have a ton of money and live for really cheap and have a high quality of life. You might have to, work other jobs where the whole social dynamic and the social status you enjoyed in the past might not exist there, right? So accept your social status will drop if you are moving from a high paying corporate job to becoming a lower paid employee who has more time freedom. And if you value that time freedom more, that'll be fine. For example, with me, I was never too attached to the banking sector's social status. I don't care about my job title and flaunting that to other people. And even though I come from an Asian background, my ethnicity is Indian, and as you might know, in many cultures, but in Asian culture, they can be very social status driven. What degree someone has, what university they went to, how much of a brand name the company is that they're working for. I never valued that, and I never built that into my social circle dynamic, so it doesn't kind of impact me. But if you are attached to your social status, then really bear that in mind if you want your freedom. And because I value freedom and independence, right? I don't really value a job title or things like that. And the reality of pursuing FIRE, financial independence and retiring early, I'm sure you've heard of the acronym FIRE, FIRE, is you can't take the standard corporate ladder path of, climbing one layer after the other, getting promoted, and then jumping off the corporate ladder, right? That's typically not how it works, right? You're going to have a interesting life of, like she says, developing a bunch of different skills, surf instructor, yoga, fitness, traveling, living in low cost of living locations, teaching languages, doing some guest relations at like a hotel or some kind of hostel, things like that. That's the truth. If any time you look at someone's financial freedom path, very rarely is it, oh, they just stayed on the corporate ladder until a certain age and then jumped off the corporate ladder and had a ton of money, savings and investments. Yeah, that's definitely possible. But typically there's an unconventional path to get there. And that's the same with entrepreneurship and things like that. You might have to pivot from one particular niche to another. You just need to bear that in mind, right? Don't think just because you're coming from a corporate environment where there was a standard path of going from analyst to associate to VP, vice president, executive director, managing director. Financial freedom typically is more free, right? It's more like unpredictable path because not everyone makes it, and there's not going to be a structured approach there. If you wanna take an unconventional path and to reach an unconventional goal, which is financial and time freedom, you're going to have unconventional experiences along the way.
We started the fourth business together, a boutique surf school in Vietnam that actually did quite well. The starting years are always slow going, but with time, momentum really picked up. And what about costs and expenditure? From the moment I quit the law, I knew I had a long road ahead, so I reduced my expenditure to only basics and essentials and switched into full-on savings mode. If you've tried it, it's just becomes so immediately clear that society's just been peddling us the wrong message all our lives. Things clearly don't bring happiness. It is great experiences that make for a good life. Ain't nobody got time for fancy clothes and branded things when there was good surf and adventures to be had. And living light and minimally means spending very little, which means any extra money can be saved and put to investment. Vitaly's and my happiest times were always when we spent summers in Bali surfing. So then it became our dream to live in Bali permanently. But it was so hard to abandon an already profitable business in Vietnam, and we didn't want to have to take up 9-to-5 jobs just to be in Bali. We weren't ready as rookies to start new business in Bali that would require a deeper capital injection with the uncertainty of return as well. So then it seemed the answer was to try to get enough passive income so we can start life here without much risk. We knew from experience our monthly living costs in Bali would be between $1,500 to $2,000. If you want to check that out in more detail, just go here. And so $2,000 became the target to hit. With that in mind, we committed to saving and building wealth in a variety of ways. We're no financial wizards, but we both have a conservative stocks portfolio. Mine is mostly US growth stocks, some cryptocurrency. I personally find that very volatile, so it's only a very small fraction of my holdings. And finally, rental property. It came as a surprise to us ourselves, but actually within about 4 years, we actually reached our goal for passive income. Maybe that's not surprising to you given how modest our goal was, but for me it was a total surprise. At the time, the pandemic also meant that our business in Vietnam had come to a halt, so there wasn't anything holding us back anymore from acting on our dream and moving to Bali, so here we are.
So it's quite interesting, right, what she said there and what we can learn from this. So firstly, when you want to pursue financial freedom, we want it to be immediate, but it does take a long road, as she says, right? Figuring out what businesses can make money, doing the surf school, which she said made a significant amount of money for them, and lowering your living cost, right? So you kind of have to, like I say, put your ego to one side, be open-minded. I mean, she managed to do it in 4 years. I'm sure they still have to work to earn some sort of income. And being in savings mode is kind of having that long-term time frame. I know nowadays we live in a society where it's very based on short-term gratification, but you have to have a long-term mindset. And so much of success nowadays requires doing opposite of what the majority of people are doing. So the majority of people are working corporate jobs and thinking that that's going to pay off. You might have to think the opposite of that to have freedom, because the system and everything it encourages is making you more of a slave and less free, right? And you can see on the quote on the screen right now, the quality of life is having the freedom to make choices that are not fear-based. Freedom to choose is the ultimate luxury. And when you understand how many people think in this system, sticking with their corporate jobs, getting their massive mortgages, maybe getting married because everyone else is, or following whatever the standard conventional path is, it's all about being driven by fear and being driven by the need to fit in and not wanting to feel left out or being the odd one out. But like I say, if you want freedom, you're going to have to be willing to kind of sacrifice that social status element. And the other important lesson here is around, valuing experience and people, right? And a key lesson I would recommend for everyone to consider is how many material items do you own? Because if you want your freedom, you have to be comfortable, whether it's traveling or doing other experiences where you will effectively have less material items on you. Typically because you need to invest a lot of that money and not buy loads of expensive cars and houses and things like that. So an important thing to consider, because I know a lot of people are kind of keen to be traveling or have some time period in their life where they are traveling quite a lot. Can you fit all your belongings in 1 or 2 bags? Because if you are going to be traveling to low cost of living jurisdictions like Bali, Thailand, parts of Latin America, think about what you actually need. And, how many clothes do you actually need? Do you need, 10 pairs of sneakers? Do you actually need 2 or 3 pairs of shoes? How many, t-shirts, trousers and things like that. So it's worthwhile looking at your material items, how attached you are to those, particularly if you want to accelerate your ability to retire early and live abroad, right? And a key lesson here also is adaptability, right? Deciding, whether to invest in a new business or not, how to pivot. A little red flag I'll mention here, and I don't know their personal circumstances, so I don't want to comment too much. I do find it a little suspicious, when she managed to really turn around a financial situation, because I'm sure the surf school was successful and she was making some money as a yoga teacher and doing these type of things. But to reach the point of like financial freedom where you don't really have to work much, I assume her husband, who had a rental property back in the West, is where they get the majority of their income, and maybe some investments in the stock market. I don't know their exact specifics, but I assume the rental property in the West is driving a significant proportion of their ability to live outside the West. Because if you say rent even a small apartment in a major city in the West, particularly in the UK or US, Australia, Canada, places like that, you could be getting $2,000 a month, right? $2,000 a month. And that would cover all your living costs living in somewhere like Bali, particularly if you're not living in one of those tourist hotspots, right? So it's worthwhile kind of considering all these items and all these stories, because some of these stories, and I'll be honest with you, financial freedom, not everyone's going to achieve it, and it's not really something for everyone's mindset. It's really, I would say, 5 to 10% of people who really can put themselves on that path and escape the traditional corporate life, for example. a lot of times there might be a little red flag that stands out. And the red flag that stands out for me in the story is the whole rental property thing, which I assume maybe it's hers. I don't know how personal circumstances, but maybe it's her husband's, and that's how they're generating the massive income they need to live humbly abroad, right? Because I don't think she'd be able to generate that level of savings and investments that much from her surf school or through being a yoga teacher, particularly in a location with Bali, like Bali, where it doesn't pay well. So we're going to listen to a last little clip here. And in this clip, we're going to learn exactly what her monthly living costs are. And that's really the key detail, I guess, for a lot of us to know. If you reach financial freedom, how much money can you spend? And I think a lot of people, sometimes they think financial freedom and retiring early means, oh, I can just spend money however I want and do what I want. No, typically there are some limits there, right? You can't just have investments that are generating $2,000 a month and you want to live like you're earning $10,000 a month. Obviously, that's not going to happen, right?
Bali, here in 2021. Excluding the once-off costs of setting up a cozy home for both of us, generally it appears that our monthly total running costs for two of us living here in Bali, now in 2021, comes in at around $1,400 to $1,500.
So there we go on the screen right now, 1,400 to 1,500 USD. That's how much they typically have to spend to live on a monthly basis, her and her husband in a small home in the coast of Bali, right? So it's something to worthwhile considering if you want that type of lifestyle, what you can get for it, and how much it typically costs. I think an important point to mention also, if you want early retirement, you want to live abroad, there will be some conveniences from the West that you won't get, right? There might be certain products, the benefits of getting Amazon delivered products, within a day or two from ordering them. They're not going to exist in these other countries. You may need to have hired an accountant to, effectively look through your costs of generating certain investments, whether it's having an accountant back in America to process all your rental property earnings. You might have to have a local property manager to manage that in the US because you're out of the country. You may need to travel back to the US regularly. So a lot of those things add to the costs that you might not have taken into account. Typically, you might see this number and go, oh, $1,500 a month for two people, living a good quality of life as an early retirement. There's probably other costs to consider. So I just want to flag that to you before we just think it's a super easy life. Now, I hope you've learned a bit about early retirement there and how you could achieve it. I've worked in finance for over 10 years, Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, many other top investment banks. And I offer career advice and help accelerate that process to your financial freedom. So there's a link in the description if you want to speak with me directly, and I look forward to helping you. Let me know in the comments what you think about early retirement. Are you pursuing it? Is it not something you're focused on? That'd be good to hear your perspective too. What do you think about the story we learned here? And like I said, link in the description to speak with me directly. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.